everyone, welcome to another video. This is one that I almost wasn't going to do, only because I feel as though at the moment there's a lot of uncertainty. Like we are talking about Trump's tariffs and its effect on all industries, but I am going to focus on luxury. And I almost wasn't going to do this video because I feel at the moment like there's a lot of change. There's a lot of almost like negotiation and retaliation going on, and I personally feel this is how I feel about it. I feel as though the tariffs announced currently could be subject to change if countries retaliate. You know, those tariffs could go up, etc. So I think at the moment I am going to do this video, but I think we should keep an eye out and look at the actual percentages that are being announced for tariffs on different countries, because I do think these could change. So what's going on? So President Trump has, as loads of you probably know, unless you don't watch the news, President Trump has announced tariffs, and some of these tariffs are like pretty high actually, particularly on China. I think is like the worst offender, where they have been tariffed to the max, and I think these tariffs are going to affect everyone, particularly if you live in the US, but if you have a business in the US and you manufacture any part of your product outside of the US, I think this could have a problem. Now, I need to say, before we start talking about numbers, I need to say I'm not an economist. I'm just sharing information that I've gathered online, as well as my own sort of opinions on this and my own thoughts. If you know different, if you have an opinion on this, feel very free to write it in the comments section below. And in the comments section below, let's keep it civil. Let's everyone be nice to each other. But yeah, feel free to share your opinion. Okay, so tariffs. In the UK, we're looking at 10%. In the EU, we're looking at 20%. Switzerland, 31%. And then China, this is what I mean. I think we're going to see fluctuations going on, because I saw 34% for China. But then I saw that increased to like 54% just recently. So I think I'm seeing these numbers quoted on actual legitimate websites, and the numbers are fluctuating, whether that's because the news articles are getting newer and there's a new tariff in place, or maybe they got the number wrong in the first place. I don't know, but that's kind of what we're looking at. So the US, here's the thing, the US, from what I gather, actually imports more than 90% of its clothing and more than 99% shoes. So if you imagine with a tariff, so I have got this unattractive pair of shoes. No, well, they are. I want to bring them, I'm a company and I want to bring them into the US to put them for sale. I hand this over, and on the value of this pair of shoes, the US will impose a 20% tariff fee onto me, the seller. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Well, I'd probably put that 20% onto the price of the shoe so that the consumer ends up paying it. The problem you've got is that over the last few years, since 2019, I've actually got a quote here that I have to read out, because I already knew this, but I just need to share it with you. There is something called greedflation, that is a terminology that's being used by some publications to describe the luxury industry and the pricing that has changed since 2019. And according to HSBC, since 2019, prices have actually gone up 54% higher than 2019. And this has actually created a bit of a dampener on spending, particularly among those who are aspirational spenders, who aspire to own the ugly shoe, who want to buy it, who go to work, who save up, etc. That is the kind of consumer who would think twice, three times, or maybe more before they go and buy said shoe. So can these brands really afford to add or to pass those tariffs on to the consumer, as well as no doubt continuing their price increases? Now, if you take Chanel, for example, back in, when was it? I think it was 2020, you know, it was when COVID was on. They were doing like combined percent increases on all of their products. When you combine them, they were doing like 30% price rises, which is massive. Are they going to carry on with that level of price increase and add an extra 20% on top of it? Is that therefore going to push the US consumer away from buying in the States and maybe taking a flight over to Europe to buy over there? But then you do that, and when you go back again and you declare it, you're going to get charged duties when you take it back into the country. So there's almost like no real way out of it. Even homegrown brands like the Row, for example, manufacture items for their products that are created outside of the States. So what does that mean for brands like that? Now, here's another thing, and here's another reason why I think at the moment we're slightly in a limbo. I think that things are going to change a lot over the coming days and weeks as things get ironed out, because it's all very well slapping tariffs on everything, but it's like, does that apply to a finished product, or does it apply to the component parts that made up that product? Like if you take a bag, for example, you've got the leather. Well, that had to come from, you know, a farmer as such, a leather production, who do whatever they do with, I don't know, a piece of leather off a cow to turn it into this. Then you've got things like the hardware, you've got the assembly. And actually I saw a really interesting quote as well from Stefano Martinetto, chief executive of Tomorrow. And he's basically saying the same thing. He's like, these products are not all made in one place. For example, you might get the fabric in Italy, other elements come from China, and then the assembly happens in Turkey. So how does that work? You know, what do you apply China's tariffs, Turkey's tariffs, and Italy's tariffs all on that one product and then charge that back to the US consumer? Surely that can't work, and that would end up being really a very difficult, like, how do you prove what came from where? I think it would be very detrimental, incredibly detrimental, but also quite hard to police. Okay, so I got thinking, well, why don't these brands just manufacture in the US? You know, take that work into the US. And when looking into this, again, I found quite a few very interesting differing opinions on this. And one big opinion, and again, let me know what you think. Obviously, you're watching this because you're interested in luxury. But when you buy, let's say, a Chanel bag, I know that there is gravitas attached to whether the bag was made in Spain or France. I know that for some people will pay more for a bag that's made in France versus one that's made in Spain. Whether all of the Chanel bag is made in France or Spain is a whole separate topic, slightly. Now we're talking about tariffs, maybe not. I've always been of the opinion that with these bags, and it's not even an opinion, I've done videos on this as well, but with a lot of these bags, it's coming out more and more that actually the hardware can be made in China, the leather can come from Turkey, and as long as the zipper is put on in Italy, you can say the whole thing's made in Italy. That's actually true. I've done videos on that before, but certainly consumers and customers are more interested in things that are made in France, let's say, when they're buying from these expensive designer brands. Think about it. If you're in the States, would you rather buy a Chanel bag made in California, let's say, or a Chanel bag made in France? What's your opinion on that? I think there will be purists who will feel as though I don't want to buy a Chanel bag that's made in the US, because when I think about Chanel, I think about France. And I think as well, a lot of brands are saying, particularly Kering, which we're going to come on to, some brands are saying, you know what, it's our culture to manufacture in France, in Italy. Again, whether they manufacture the whole thing there is a separate topic, but they're saying that's our culture, that's who we are as a brand, that's our ethos. We don't want to manufacture anywhere else. We're a European brand. I think we will find that brands favoured by the highly affluent, if you take Hermes for example, I don't think that brands like that are really going to have too much of an issue. Let's say they continue manufacturing in France, because why would why would Hermes manufacture anywhere else? That is very much who they are. I think that they will obviously pass this cost on to the consumer, and the consumer will continue to pay that price. But other brands, if you take Gucci, for example, part of the Kering group, Gucci is a brand that is, I really see Gucci as an aspirational brand. I love Gucci. I really like some of the Gucci pieces, but I think it's almost like, I don't want to say cheap, but it's one of the cheaper brands when you think about your Chanel's, your Dior's, your Louis Vuittons. You can buy bags from Gucci that are sort of like £1,500 and a bit less. So I feel as though Gucci is an aspirational brand, and a lot of those customers, when I've done these videos before, you know, looking into this and the economics behind it, a lot of those customers that are aspirational are already thinking twice before spending that money. And so slapping an extra 20% onto that kind of consumer is most likely going to turn them off. Now, LVMH, this one I thought was quite interesting. So LVMH have been quite open about being very pro-Trump. And one of the things that they have done, which I was reading into this and I was like, oh my God, this is so interesting. So LVMH actually have manufacturing facilities now in California and in Texas. So that it's not that the whole bag is made there, but component parts, this is what I've read, component parts of a bag are produced there, or maybe assembled there. Does that, and that's just for Louis Vuitton. That's not for any of the other LVMH brands right now. That's just for Louis Vuitton. That could change, but as of today, that's the situation. Does that excuse those Louis Vuitton items from tariffs? It depends if the whole thing has been made there. If parts of it, which will be the case, like the leather or the canvas or the zippers, have come from other places around the world, then it looks like currently tariffs will still be applied. But again, going back to that point I mentioned earlier, if a bag has been made in 5 different countries, what do? Charge 5 different levels of tariff on that one bag? How is it going to work? I don't feel like it's been fully thought out. And that's why I think that we're going to see a lot of change coming up. Now, Kering, just to finish on Kering, so LVMH are quite open on the face of it to moving production more to the US. Whether you would want a US created bag over one created in France, again, going back to that point, that's down to you. But Kering are saying no. Kering has said it is very much our culture and our ethos and in our DNA that our products are produced in Europe, and that's where they want to stay with those products. So again, what do we think that's going to do to prices? I think that without doubt, brands will pass these tariff prices on to us. I don't even think there's a question about it. I think it's going to happen. The question is, can brands afford, in this time where luxury spending has considerably slowed down, can they afford to not only charge you guys tariffs, but also put up their prices by the percentage extents that they have been for the last 5 years? Can they afford to do it? Or will it eventually seriously bite them on the bottom and reach a point where their sales really do grind to a halt and go down quite a lot? That's just my thoughts. The benefit to what's going on right now, if you can see one, well, it kind of is and isn't a benefit. David and I are really into investing. That's our thing. And in the UK, they coined the term Monday just gone, Black Monday, because I don't know whether you saw what happened to the markets, but things really hit the pan pretty badly. But actually, maybe not so much now, but a few days ago was a really good time to buy shares. And I would say it's kind of like we're very much in a bear market at the moment. I think we are starting to come out of it. But I would say if you're into investing, if you want to get into it, again, I'm not an economic expert. I'm not a finance person. I'm just an individual who's into this kind of thing. I would actually say that when things are down is a really good time to buy, even though it can feel quite scary. I always feel like when I talk to people are, when things are on the up and they're super expensive, when shares are really expensive, a lot of people are saying to me, I'm going to buy into it. And I'm like, why don't you wait until it comes down a bit? But then they're like, oh, I don't want to buy into it because it's doing badly. Yeah, but it will bounce back up again, you know, in time. You've got to be a long-term investor though. That's a whole separate topic. But I wanted to share that for any of you wanting to get into investing, because don't be too, like, obviously don't invest more than you can afford to. But when things are down, it's a really good time to kind of get in there and buy shares for like your favorite brands, your favorite companies, brands that you've got an interest in is what I would always say. So that's kind of what I think. I will come back and do another video on this because, as I've said, I really think things are going to change. I think that there is loads of red tape to actually sort out here, and I think we're going to have a lot of countries trying to negotiate. I know they're saying the UK is going to try and negotiate and come up with like a better trade deal. I think things are going to move a lot. I do not think this is like, I know that they've already come into effect as of 3rd of April, I think, from memory, but I think we're going to see things fluctuate, maybe for the better, maybe for the worst, but I think we're going to see things change, and that's just my opinion. But again, if you've got an opinion, if you've got any insider knowledge, if you're an economist, whatever the case may be, or if you're not, just share your opinion below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.